Hi everyone, my name's Branovan, and I've been with the grocer for almost 7 years now. So I work with Nick on the sales and the community relations side of things. So idea up until the farm arrives to you, that's where a lot of our work is done. I'll also let my colleague Nick introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan, and thanks everyone who's joined. And to answer your question, Rob, no, you're not the only one. Don't worry. I guess yes, and I'm business development manager. I work very closely with Brandon. I work with a lot of different organizations, including also individual entrepreneurs to help launch their project. I'll be able to provide some insight, and I invite anyone if they're curious about their project, if they haven't already, to send me an email at the address you see right there, and I'd be happy to find a time, even one-on-one, to chat a little bit more about how we can help you get started on a farming project of your own.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. So on the agenda today is how do we get started with funding or financing a project? How does the planning process take place? What are the actual steps in terms of funding and financing? And then off to submitting the application itself and making sure you have the best odds to get an approval there. So we'll run through specific steps, and Nick and Holly, my colleague, are also on the call here. They'll be able to provide some of their insights on the projects that they've supported over the years. So how to get started? First key thing is to really understand what your project goals are and really understanding what the end goal is. So are you looking to launch a project to supply food locally via distribution models direct with consumer, or is it going to be to retailers or local businesses? To really understand what the end goals are, highlighting some of your previous projects and learning. So are you a current grower? Have you worked in the region? Just having those details listed out. Have you done any previous community or market engagements? So have you chatted with the local folks to see if there's interest for the produce? Have you chatted with any local businesses, restaurants, if they're interested in buying produce locally, and also engaging with any retailers? So how many grocery stores are there? Are there local growers throughout the year? What are the preferences of crops at those stores to really understand what the current market looks like? And then secondly, to also understand who's going to be sort of involved in the planning steps with you. Are you partnering with any organizations? Do you have any partners that you're working with, or will you be leading the project by yourself? So once we have a sort of detailed idea of the project scope here, a lot of the secondary focus will be on how will the food be distributed locally. So is it, like I mentioned, direct to consumers via food box? So are we going to do a weekly food box and have folks sign up? And next, another option that we've seen other folks do is also sell the produce to local institutions, directly to maybe hospitals, schools, so they can meet their local food procurement mandates. And then thirdly, we've seen a lot of folks also create their own brand, approach retailers locally. So be it an independent grocery store or co-op store, a local business, and sell the produce throughout the year. And again, working with a retailer allows you to sort of understand what the preferences are of the local market, what they're buying, what they're selling, and then sort of grow accordingly. And again, each one of these models has benefits to it as well. So maybe retailers, you're able to sell more in volume throughout the year. Subscription box, you may be able to have a larger margin because you're selling direct and you limit packaging costs and things like that. But every market would be different, and our team's here to sort of support you through that entire process and figuring out which venues to go down. In terms of planning, to get ready for a financing or funding application, what are the three steps that you really need to focus on is having those partner meetings, having a site selected, and then having the supporting documents that would go in with your funding or financing application. So partner meeting is making sure that you're presenting the project to buyers or other partners, so folks that might be involved in the day-to-day operation with you, or folks that are looking to buy the produce off the operation, and getting supportive letters of support. So we do have templates that we could provide that Nick should share with you. It could be a bit different for retailers, and it would be different for folks that you're looking to partner with. So we have those documents signed accordingly to make sure that that is something that you could attach to your funding or financing applications. The second step is looking at your site. So where are you looking to put the farm? Does the site have all the prerequisites? So is there enough space, access to water, enough power? And then once you have that site selected, are you looking to do the site prep yourself or you're hiring local contractors? So just figuring those details out to make sure that you have a good idea of where this project's going to be hosted. And then finally, you'd want to make sure you're having all the documentations from those conversations with the partner meeting. So if there's letters of support or contracts for produce distribution, having those documents ready, having estimates and quotes from us, and then the contractors if you're looking to hire a contractor. And the other key supporting documents are business plans. So now you have an idea of where you're going to sell the produce, how you're going to sell it, what price points you're going to sell it at. So putting that into more of a formal document, like a business plan, definitely helps when you're looking into funding and financing applications. And sometimes we see folks also get requested other documents like financial statements, site-specific documents, financial commitment from other contributors, or for example, a letter saying that you'll be contributing a specific amount for the project. And again, each funding and financing application may vary, but these are typically what we see for projects that are driven by entrepreneurs. So now let's jump into more of the grants and financing side. So what is currently available and what does the process look like? So if we look into the grant side of things, there's funders that are regional. So for specific region, be it Northern Ontario, Northern BC, Southern Ontario, urban areas specifically. There's provincial funders that are, for example, could be the BC government, the Ontario government, and there's also federal funders that are more federal agencies like Agriculture Canada that fund projects throughout the country. And then you also have financial institutions like Farm Credit Canada that are lenders specific to farmers. And then you also have the Indigenous financial institutions, and then you have the major banks as well. So again, each of these different funders and finance folks have different requisites and prerequisites and requirements for their funding programs, and they operate under different sort of requirements. So we'd have to sort of tailor the approach to those specific funders. So things to really consider when looking at different funding and financing options is who is the applicant and are they eligible? So for example, if you approach Agriculture Canada, they may ask that you are an existing grower that has been growing for 2 years, or if you're a new grower, they would have certain criteria that's required. So making sure you're fitting the applicant criteria, and then they have specific criteria for their program. So they might have multiple different programs. They might have programs for new growers. They might have programs for existing growers, things like that. So making sure that we're meeting those criterias. And then outside of that, they do have specific mandates as well. So for example, some funders and finance folks will have specific criteria for specific regions throughout the year that they're looking to promote and specific mandates as well. So uh, Agriculture Canada may have a program that will support new growers specific to non-urban areas because they're looking to promote agriculture in those areas. So different criteria and mandates will belong to each funding and financing agency. So other considerations to typically look at is the deadlines and stages that they may have. So they may have an expression of interest stage, where you fill up a 1 or 2 pager and they're looking to assess you as an applicant before they give you the actual application. And then some folks will have specific deadlines that you need to meet for those specific stages as well. So you might go through the first stage, and then the second phase, you might be approved and you're supposed to fill up the form within 30 days and have a business plan to stretch. So who's the applicant? What are the specific criteria for the funding program? What are the mandates of the funder and financer, and what are their specific deadlines? So those are typically the crucial factors you're looking at before applying. And then during the application process, they might request supporting documents, like I mentioned. The business plan is something that's typically seen for more entrepreneurial projects, and then also financial statements if you're an existing entrepreneur trying to leverage your project as well. So typically planning the application process, throughout the application process, it would definitely make sense to start working on those documents before you submit an application, because sometimes the turnarounds are pretty quick. And then the other crucial component to look at of any funding or financing application is what are the financial contribution requirements. So be it what is the contribution they require from the applicant. So some folks will have a 50% loan, 20% grant, the remaining percent an interest-free loan. Some folks will require 20% down payment from the applicant. So really understanding what is the exact financial contribution they require from the applicant. There's loan versus grant ratios for some programs. So they might give you 80% loan, and then the 20% could be a grant contribution, depending on the success of the project. And then some folks, again, will have specific percentages that they require from the applicant. And then one other crucial factor to really look at in the terms is what expenses are eligible. So for example, some funders will fund capital costs, so the cost of the asset, the farm to grow, the lights, etc., but they will not fund wages or growing materials or your site preparation costs. So if you're submitting an application, you are typically asked to cover the expenses that are eligible. So it could be just the farm costs. So the remaining costs outside of your 20% deposit may have to cover the seeds, your growing materials, your shipping costs, and also your training costs. And again, all these criteria to consider vary for every single funder and every single financing institution as well. So here's an example of just
Can
a,
I,
yeah,
Brandon, sorry, I just wanted to set one, and I apologize for cutting you off. Just on your last slides, I just also wanted to set the expectations as well, specifically with the last section there, financial contributions requirement. Brandon did a really good job explaining that. And as far as like the loan to grant ratio, you might see for like nonprofits and other similar organizations where you could get actually 100% or near the total project costs, let's say, covered. When you're, a business or more specifically an entrepreneur looking to start up, uh, just as an expectation, it will be difficult to find 100% funding for things like this at that level. And typically they will require sort of a give and a take. So a cash contribution of your own. So again, I'm just butting in, I guess, to say like there should be some expectation management where you shouldn't expect to have 100% of your costs covered, for example, for a grocer project, but that doesn't mean there aren't programs out there that can cover, a significant portion of that, right? Like even 10, 20, 30% will go a long way. And the light at the end of the tunnel is getting started is the hardest part. Once you're in operation, there'll actually be much more that will be available to you in the form of grants, in the form of tax credits, in the form of provincial loans. So it's a bit of a chicken or the egg conversation where yeah, you might need the grant to start up, but trust me, if you get through those kind of first stages, that first year, there are more opportunities that will open up. So I just wanted to kind of add that level of input as well. But yeah, carry on, Brandon. Thank you.
yeah, thank you, Nick, for jumping in. And again, that's very important, like especially when you're applying for a project that is looking to generate revenue. A lot of the funders are very minimal on their grant percentages, especially for projects that are looking to create an economic benefit for an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
And here's just an example of what funding and financing folks will have on their website. So just to allow you to see what you're looking at specifically before you start applying to things. Here's who is eligible. So this is just an example of what a funding or financing application looks like. So you can apply if you're one of the following. So existing farmer, beginning farmer, that's less than 6 years of farming, startup farmers, farmers taking over the family farm, part-time farmers, agriculture co-op. So as you see here, they're pretty open. So they're even open to new farmers. So that's something that you really want to make sure that you're falling into the criteria, because you don't want to go through a whole business plan and then realize that you're not really eligible for this funding or financing, but you want to look at those criteria really specifically. And a lot of the funding agencies and financing folks are pretty clear on who's eligible. So it's directly listed on their website. Here's another example, like directly from a funding page and a financing page on what is ineligible as an expense. So operating loans for purchasing short-time assets, paying off loans, and improvements to your existing project, things like that. So you really want to make sure that the financing and funding folks are able to cover a new asset that fits into their mandate. So if it's a new agriculture piece of equipment, that they're able to cover that. So for example, if you already have an existing project and you're looking to scale up, some funders might not be open to funding or financing that project. So just looking at the fine details before you really dive into the application process. And then one thing I really wanted to cover here as well was the stacking. So when we say stacking is putting multiple different funding and financing programs together, it's definitely something that's a bit difficult to do because you have to have the perfect timing and all criteria definitely need to line up together for you to get approved. So when we say the primary funder, so a person that's going to fund over 50% of your project cost, so you just have to make sure that we're meeting their expectations, their timelines, and do they need a secondary funder to be in place already before giving an approval? So just to give you an example here, you may have financial institutions that being open to financing you 70%. The remaining 30%, you could go look at a secondary funder, but you just have to make sure that they're all okay with that sort of stacking. So sometimes they might ask for a letter of support from your secondary funder, so the primary funder can approve your project. So again, takes a bit of coordination, making sure criterias and timelines line up to make sure this has happened. But we have seen this happen a few times, but it is definitely a lengthier process to do. And here's just an example, just to showcase what is possible with financing and funding options for a project. So here we're looking at a one farm project. So it's around $350,000 total project cost. So that's the farm, the training, the site prep, shipping, your first year growing materials. So what you're looking at here is a site preparation costs. So that's a non-cash contribution from the applicant, so yourself. So that's around $30,000. You may be able to do it for a bit less, so you could save your cost there. And then in-kind cash contribution of $70,000. So that's pretty much the down payment for the project. And then you have a federal funder that could give you around 15,000. You may have a provincial funder that could also match that with another 15,000. So now you're looking at financing a project around the $220,000. And again, the contributions from a federal and a provincial will vary based off of who you are, where you're located, what your goals are. Have you already launched a project like this before in the past? Same thing for the financing folks. So sometimes there is preferred rates for folks that are new or experienced in this project. And again, the numbers will vary. So if you want to really dive into some of these numbers and look at your options, you could definitely contact Nick or I, and we could definitely sort of work with you throughout this process.
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to add to this is there's a really handy tool, and it's difficult for us to put forth like a bunch of like real-time examples of live funding applications because there's such a range of eligibility based on what you're doing, based on, your location and what's available. But if you go and simply Google Business Benefits Finder, it's a tool actually by the government of Canada that will basically, you kind of outline, it asks you, I'm looking for grants and financing for my business. And it kind of walks through different questions that it asks you. And then we'll actually list out a bunch of programs, whether they be loans or financing or grants, excuse me. So it could be a great tool to see what's currently available. You can filter to say, what's currently accepting applicants and what isn't, or what's opening soon. I encourage it again. That's Business Benefits Finder Canada. If you just Google those four words, it should be one of the first links that come up, and it can be a great resource, like I said, to just see what's out there and what you may be eligible for.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick. So we'll run into the final piece of the puzzle here, which is you have an idea what your project is. You have all your supporting documents. We found a funding or financing program that fits. So the next step is making sure that we're putting a proposal or an application forward that is very likely to get approved. So what we want to make sure is that we're registered on their portal or we have access to the application to directly submit. And again, sometimes there's timelines. You want to make sure that you're creating a portal, talking to the right people so you have access to the application itself. So once you filled up your application, again, we could support you through that process. You submit directly to the funder or the financing firm. And you have to make sure that you're also attaching all the supporting documents. So be it the title of ownership for the business, be it your business plan, be it your existing contributions, be it letters of support for folks that are looking to buy the produce, anything to strengthen your application at that point. So once you've attached all those documents and you've submitted, you want to confirm that the funder or financer has received your application. And again, you want to make sure that you're meeting all their timelines and deadlines too. And then they may have follow-ups requesting additional information, which typically happens. So you want to make sure you're meeting those timelines too. And then they also might have a second stage, which is to submit a secondary application as well. So you make sure you're meeting all those specific requirements as well. So once you get an approval, you'll be signing a contract with them. There'll be timelines, there'll be contribution and payments made to you. And then there's probably going to be a reporting phase of that as well. So you want to make sure that you're coordinating everything with the funding and financing agency. And if you're declined for funding or financing, it's definitely crucial to ask for feedback. Sometimes it's just because of timing and they were oversubscribed to for that year. They might recommend another funder or financer that they know that could support you with the project, or they might just say, hey, can you apply in the next quarter, which is at the end of next month per se. So it's definitely crucial to ask for feedback. And sometimes you might hear like, hey, we could have approved this if you're able to put a 25% down instead of a 20% down because our ratios were, we weren't meeting the ratio threshold or they just didn't have enough money for that quarter. So just making sure that you're having that conversation. So you could potentially submit an application for the next round as well. So here's just an example of a handful of previous funders that have funded projects. And again, some of the projects were stacked, so multiple folks joining in. So there's Agriculture Canada. So they do offer loans and grants depending on the criteria of the project and the applicant itself. There's Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada. So they're a pretty federal agency, but they have regional branches. So if you're located out in BC, you would apply to or reach out to the folks in the West. There's prairies for the folks in the provinces, and then there's Ontario, there's North and South. There's Quebec, and there's the Atlantic provinces as well. And regional and provincial funders, every province or territory typically has a Ministry of Agriculture. They often have different grants and loan opportunities as well. And then again, we worked with quite a few financial institutions as well. So Farm Credit Canada being one of them. So they're a lender specific for growers. So it's 100% Canadian agency. And then we've also worked with major banks. So if you're already banking with RBC, be it, or Scotiabank or BMO, they do have specific opportunities for existing growers and they do offer farming loans as well. And one thing to really crucially highlight here is funding programs have cycles and they have times of year that they're open and close. So there may not be funding today or financing today, but there could be opportunities in the future. So typically the government fiscal year renews in April. So there may be funding and financing opportunities that open up. And again, the programs will vary based on who the applicant is, but it's definitely crucial to sort of keep your eyes open and see if there's any new funding or financing options available. So in terms of specific funding opportunities that we've seen and financing opportunities that we've seen, here's one that's specific for BC. The only sort of asterisk here is that it is specific for Indigenous entrepreneurs. So this is specific to BC folks that are Indigenous. There is an intake too, which will be opening up in May 1st. We have a few partners that have successfully received funding here for this project. So they do plan they help with some of the planning side and the capital cost. Another program is with Agriculture Canada. It's called the Canadian Agricultural Loans Act, CALA, and it's distributed through different financial institutions. So if you're currently banking with RBC, you can definitely approach them and have a conversation about the CALA loan. So there's specific terms that apply, and it's pretty much a loan eligibility if you're a new farmer or looking to grow food. And they do have content directly available on their website as well that you can check out. And another institution that I mentioned a few times is Farm Credit Canada, and this is they do have a few options. If you're a young farmer, existing grower, new grower, there's tons of different programs. And again, they do offer preferred rates for growers. So this is a bank that's specifically for farmers. And if you're a new farmer, a young farmer, they have different programs based on what you want to do. And do give preferred rates. They do have seasonal grant components that they give for planning and supporting of the project. So that's something that you could look at as well. And typically, they have a representative for every region across the country. So if you're located in London, Ontario, there'll definitely be an office there. So you could contact those folks and get a consultation with them on what's required for an approval, what sort of options do you have specifically. And then working on a few projects with them in the past. I know they could share a bit of insight here. They do lend based off of business and applicant personality and character. So they're not just looking at the ROI and the business side of things. They're looking at both the ROI and the business outcome, and then also the applicant himself and their criteria if they're looking to get into farming as a new primary role. So based off of what your goals are, what you're looking to do, what your current financial contributions are, we could definitely provide support. So I would highly recommend that you book a call with Nick, and he could definitely provide a tailored approach and align the requirements. First and foremost, we want to work with you in figuring out where your food is going, because that's the key component to making an application successful. We do have training and services that we can offer to make sure that you're finding the right people to approach just to find out if there's a distribution opportunity, and then we could come up with a targeted funding and financing plan. So is there financing options? What do they look like? What do we need? And then working with you on that.
And the good thing is about this is that if we're able to work together and you are able to put together, call it a like some sort of package of a proposal that could be, it has a business plan attached, it has these elements built into it, then it can be easily interchangeable between loans, between, financing applications, between grants. So it's not like just doing it once for one grant is a bunch of work all for naught if you aren't approved. This is information that can be continuously built upon and improved upon to give yourself a better chance over time. So if you're willing to, put the time in and put the work in, and this is a project that you're passionate about starting, uh, you know, this is not just a kind of a one-time thing to try once. It will be work that will be able to be repurposed. So like Brandon said, my email was at the beginning. I think it'll be at the end again, nick@thegrocer.ca. So if you want to send me an email, I'd be happy to chat with you a little bit more about your options.
I think this is also a perfect segue into your section here, Nick.
Perfect. So, just as a kind of an addition to some of the things that Brandon brought up, and this isn't necessarily it's not a grant, but it is an alternative financing solution that we've recently launched, and we'll be opening our second cohort of applicants sometime soon. So ultimately, Grocer Finance, the whole idea behind it is to give people who aren't able to or don't want to access traditional financing methods a way to get started with their growing project with a more tailored financing solution that ultimately will aim to lower the upfront capital required for you to get into a vertical farming business with Grocer. You can go to the next slide. Yeah. So like I mentioned in the last, so a big part of it is to lower that upfront capital contribution that's required of you. That, think about like maybe the traditional big four banks who are more, call it risk averse. They might not be willing and might require a larger upfront down payment from yourself. You don't have personal guarantees required, which can always be said for other means of financing. And ideally, it's a pretty flexible long-term financing solution to allow you to have those affordable monthly installments to give you the ability to, sell your produce and pay for the farm while having some cash flow on top of it. How this works is we wanted to match these aspiring growers who were having difficulty finding financing solutions because this is such a novel idea. We realized that there is a clear gap in the market out there, and that's why Grocer Finance was founded. And we matched those with socially minded investors who wanted to invest in the local food economy movement and invest ultimately what it comes down to in entrepreneurs trying to make a difference in their communities while providing themselves with a living. So social investors invest in the farms. Grocer works with the growers to create the business plan and then lease the farm. And the farm is installed for you to use and distribute to, create your business, provide to your community, and grow the local food movement across Canada and North America. So to qualify for grocer finance, you're either part of an organization or an experienced entrepreneur interested in doing this type of farming. Ideally, you'd want to own or have available to lease land with utilities. So basically have a site available to you that's adequate to host a 40-foot by 10-foot farm unit from grocer. You want to have produce distributions channels because at the end of the day, what I always say is Brandon and I can sit here and tell you how much you're going to be able to grow, following the right instructions and the training that we provide with our farms. But being able to sell the produce is, Captain Obvious over here, but of course, paramount to, well, being able to have the proper cash flow and run your business. So that's something that I always really highlight people give a lot of thought into, just because it does, of course, your sales will make or break your business. So having a good idea about where and how you're going to sell your produce is paramount. You want to also be able to secured the required funds to finance the site prep. So that's another portion of it is yes, there's the cost of the farm, but you also want to have the site available to you and have the means to be able to set up that site properly for ultimately a farm that will last 30 plus years in the field, producing greens, produce in general, consistently. All of that kind of goes into this other point of having a business plan. So being able to actually lay that out and provide it to the people at Grocer Finance to take a look for approval. So having a clear financial plan, marketing and sales plan, outlining your site details and the costs associated with that, like you would with any other application towards financing and, some funding grant opportunities as well. And of course, a good understanding of and the expectations around what it means to run a grocer farm, what you're able to grow, what those operating costs will be, and we will be able to send you that information, provide you with the financial projections tool if you're invited to apply for the full application. So that part, will of course help you out with. How to apply. There's a few steps. So the preliminary application form is how they start. We're going to be releasing cohort number 2, likely by May 2024. So coming up in the next, month and a half here. So please keep an eye on our socials and our emailing list, or get in touch with me and I'll make sure that you're made aware of when this intake period will be officially opening. Once you submit that, you'll await for approval and they'll be evaluated within 10 to 12 business days after that preliminary deadline is over. Upon the approval, you'll be invited to, so a certain portion of those preliminary applicants are then invited to apply for a full application within 90 days. So let's say I'm just making up dates here, on June 1st, you are notified that you're invited. You'll have 90 days from then. We'll set a deadline date with you to submit and work on the full application. In the meantime, we'll work with you. Someone from the grocery side here, like myself, for example, will work with you and give you assistance on addressing your questions, help giving you feedback and insights into other successful projects and how you can make your application as strong as possible when you do put it towards grocer finance for final approval. We'll also give you all the tools to do everything. So we'll provide you with everything you need to put forth that application. That's the idea there. Provided a reference check is conducted and any follow-up questions or conditional approvals are made, you'll then, kind of submit your application and await approval, and full applications will be assessed again within about a couple weeks. So I think the biggest takeaway here, though, going baby steps, is to keep your eye out for the preliminary application if this does interest you, which again will be coming up sometime within the next 2 months. And for any questions about grocer finance or really anything that we chatted about today, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is right there. I'm happy to have a conversation with any of you about your project and, at the very least, be able to point you in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Does anyone have any specific questions? I know Pamela initially raised her hand there.
We do have one question here from anonymous attendee. We'll give them a second to maybe type out their question. And again, if you're uncomfortable or prefer to maybe write out a more prolonged question, you can send me an email and I can either answer via email or we can get on a phone call sometime too. So if you're not comfortable, we can always do it that way as well.
Perfect. So Nick's email is Nick at the grocer. And again, there's different, really want to highlight here that there's different options for every project in terms of funding or financing. So if you're an existing farmer, there's different opportunities to look at versus if you're a new farmer, if you're an Indigenous entrepreneur farmer, there's also different options based off of the scope of your project and where you're located. So if anything, reach out to Nick and we'll able to work with you on what the options are and how we want to sort of move forward on those potential options. So thank you everyone for jumping on. I hope everyone has a great afternoon and look forward to connecting with everyone soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.